Chris Vannini, the senior writer for college football for The Athletic, is joining us. And Chris, man, what a weekend of college football. Saturday, we got it. We saw a little bit of everything. I'll start with the biggest game, I think, of them all, Oregon versus Ohio State. What did this game prove, or did it prove anything to college football that these are still, regardless, two of the best teams in all of the country?
Yeah, I think it showed they're two of the best. I think it showed Oregon can compete at that top level, something we weren't sure about, something they haven't done yet under Dan Lanning. They've lost a lot of those big games close. They finally got one of those. And if you're Ohio State, I think there's a little bit of concern. I think a lot of people thought this was the most talented team in the country coming into the season. And cornerbacks were not great. They got beat deep. The defensive line didn't get a sack. I think this is still a very good Ohio State team, but in terms of national championship favorite, I think they're maybe not at that level. They're in this group with a few other teams.
I mean, with the $20 million roster, the Ohio State is still a team that we're considering. They're a college. So you still say that they're a college football playoff contender, but are they national championship contenders? They're still, what do they need to work on in the next weeks with the weeks ahead?
Yeah, well, they got Penn State coming up in a couple of weeks. That's going to be a gigantic, probably top 5 matchup between those teams. And I think if you're Ohio State, you got to be better on the defensive line. Again, they're Ryan Day is 0-3 against Michigan. He's 0-2 against Oregon. And the defensive line has only gotten 1 sack in those games. And that defensive line is full of guys who turned down the NFL, who got a lot of NIL money to stay and come back. You have to be able to pressure the quarterback much better than that. That's what your defense is really based around. And I thought Will Howard played fine, played pretty well. Obviously the slide at the end is not what you want, but that was kind of a weird play.
Right.
And if they don't call that offensive pass interference on Jeremiah Smith, Ohio State maybe kicks a field goal and wins that game, and the conversation is a bit different. But those margins are the difference between winning and losing when you're in these top 5 matchups, and Ryan Day is now 2-6 against top 5 teams.
You know, one of the other big games on Saturday, Chris, was obviously the Red River Showdown, Texas and Oklahoma. And you kind of got a sense that, is it still the same luster of it now? Not Big 12 teams anymore, 2 SEC teams. But yet you clearly watch that football game and it's like, wait. Texas and Oklahoma, there was a wide gap between these two teams. We saw it on Saturday. We know where Texas is. I thought it was like Oklahoma didn't look like an SEC football team, where Texas still looks like the best team in the country.
Yeah, I think Texas is still in that group. It took a little bit for Quinn Ewers coming back from the injury to get things going. He threw an interception on his first pass. He missed a couple of throws earlier, but he settled in as it went on. And I think Texas is in that top 4, top 5 group of national championship contenders. They've got a big one with Georgia coming to town this week. For Oklahoma, they've been decimated by injuries. Their top 5 receivers are out. The offensive line has been banged up and has been missing some things. But still, you got to be better than this in year 3 under Brent Venables. You had Jackson Arnold, your hyped up former 5-star quarterback. He was supposed to be the guy who carries you into the future. He gets benched in the 4th game of the season. We haven't seen him since. And so the offense is just a mess. The defense is much better. Brent Venables has fixed that side of the ball like he was supposed to. They are recruiting pretty well. But offensively, they just have not had any answers. They have not had any depth. And this, you're right, this does not look like an SEC team on offense, or at least what we thought from Oklahoma coming in. This is a team that never has a losing season. This is a team that's always winning 10 games a year. And now you're looking for the second time in 3 years. They're probably not going to hit that mark.
Senior writer, college football for The Athletic, Chris Vannini, joining the Rich Eisen Show. Kirk Morrison here filling in for Rich. Look, I've been excited all season long, because now we're getting to this slate of conference games, Chris, where I only thought I would see these in January, right? And I'm talking about last week, Penn State coming to Los Angeles to take on the USC Trojans. You just mentioned it. This will be a Sugar Bowl matchup, Texas and Georgia, and yet I get to see this in the middle of October. Let's start there with this matchup. How huge is this game? Is this an elimination game for Georgia, who's already lost 1 game on the season to Alabama? They lose 2 conference games, they're going to be looking at an at-large bid, but I can't believe that this could be an early elimination game for Georgia, where yet Texas is still showing people that this is the game for them to show everybody they truly are the number 1 team in the country.
Yeah, I mean, the SEC really is kind of beating itself up right now. There's only one undefeated team. It's Texas. And so if you're any of these other teams, you start racking up those losses. If you get to 9-3, you're going to be on that bubble. You may not be in. We saw it with Ole Miss. They lose to Kentucky in a surprising upset. Then suddenly you lose to LSU and you've got 2 losses, and you have, I think, Georgia still on the schedule. And suddenly your season has dramatically changed what you thought it could be. Georgia loses to Alabama. They've got Texas now. They got some other tough games as well. And those losses can rack up. And it's not just whether you're in the playoff or not as well. If you need to get to the SEC championship game to play for the bye, you want to host a first round game if you don't get a bye versus playing on the road. Those are going to be very different scenarios for seeding. And I think with the playoff, a lot of us are thinking, well, they're probably going to make it in anyway, so it doesn't really matter. No, because you get those losses racking up, you may not be in. You may be on that bubble. And if you do get in, you may be going on the road to play a Penn State or somebody like that. And your path gets a lot more difficult. So the SEC has a lot of games in the second half of the season that are going to be elimination games. And if Georgia gets a second loss here, suddenly, yeah, they will be on that bubble of, I don't know if this team's going to make it by the end of the season.
You mentioned Penn State. Has USC covered tight end Tyler Warren yet? Are you sure you're aware of this? Please let me know.
17 catches, tying the FBS record for catches by a tight end in a single game. He was unbelievable. James Franklin has been really high on this guy for a long time, and you can see why. And not only that, he completed a pass for 9 yards. He also snapped the ball one time. This guy can do everything, and that was an unbelievable performance. And he brought them back and helped them come back to win that game out there in LA.
Chris, we're in a world of NIL. We're in a world of the transfer portal. We're in a world of guys moving, coaches moving, and yet here we are on Monday, October 14th, and Army and Navy are ranked. Tell me, what world are we in now, Chris? What kind of world are we in college football where Army and Navy are ranked football teams? This isn't the ordinary Army-Navy anymore.
Well, and they've been dominant. I mean,
Yes.
Navy beat Memphis. Navy beat Memphis, who was a favorite to win the American and maybe reach the playoff. And Army has not trailed all season. And so they have been really dominating who they play. Now, the schedules haven't been the toughest. Army hasn't played a team with more than 2 wins, and Navy's played 1 team. But that was a 5-1 Memphis team that they beat. And so you've got some games coming up in the second half of the season. Notre Dame has to play both of these teams, and that could be a bit of a challenge. Yeah. Army's got to play North Texas still. Navy's got to play Tulane. So there are some big games in the American Athletic Conference coming down. And by the way, that Army-Navy game is after the conference championship. It's after the playoff field is decided. So there's a chance we could get an Army-Navy conference championship game. The winner may make the playoff. And then they have to play the next week anyway for a game that's basically just about bragging rights in the Commander-in-Chief's trophy. And then one of those teams will then have the playoff game. So it really is kind of a wild scenario. I don't know if anybody expected, especially the first year of the 12-team playoff. But yeah, Army-Navy, the troops, both ranked for the first time since 1960.
Ooh, see, I love chaos, Chris. See, that's the chaos that I love, that we could possibly have a game where the Army-Navy game is just a game, and yet both teams have a chance to really shake up the college football playoff. That's what I love about this sport, man. Senior writer, college football for The Athletic, Chris Vannini, joining the Rich Eisen Show. I was talking a little bit of USC because they had a great week 1 win. And all of a sudden, they've lost now. They're at 3-3. And we're not talking about the team that they lost to. Because remember, the world was caving in after week 1. Remember, Brian Kelly and LSU, what is going on? I need to coach better. We got to be better. He kind of called out his players, and yet they won the last 4 games in a row. They look like a much better football team, and now they could be that team that is now creeping its way back into the conversation of a possible conference championship game. Not necessarily an at-large bid, but trying to still have a chance to win the SEC.
Yeah, they've been kind of gritting these games out. They had to come back to beat South Carolina. They come back to beat Ole Miss. They didn't lead in that game until the final play of the game. They had to make that comeback, and Ole Miss couldn't put the game away when it had the chance. The defense is getting better. That was the weakness of this team for the last couple of years. It's why Jaden Daniels could win a Heisman Trophy and the team couldn't make the playoff. Even though this defense lost Harold Perkins, the star pass rusher at linebacker, it's still getting better, and that's a good sign. And Garrett Nussmeier, the quarterback, didn't have a great game against Ole Miss, but he just kept sticking in it and made enough plays at the end to win the game. And yeah, that was maybe almost a playoff eliminator game between LSU and Ole Miss last year. And LSU still got a pretty tough schedule to go. They've got Alabama still to play. But you win those games, you keep advancing every week, you're going to be in that playoff picture at the end of the year, or the SEC picture, because again, everybody's dropping some unexpected games. And so LSU's, they lose that first game against USC, and we kind of put them on the back burner for a while. And suddenly they're back here as a top 10 team, and a team you have to think about again.
One of the things you mentioned, some of these SEC teams beating each other up, I think the Big Ten will start to play itself out a little bit more. I've been hanging out in the Big 12 over the last couple of weeks, watching how that conference is just wide open. Avery Johnson had a big game for Kansas State last week. We're watching what's going on at BYU. They're an outstanding team. I say all this to bring up what I'm seeing from Ashton Jeanty. I'm not no newcomer to him. He's been doing it since his freshman year there at Boise State. But because of these teams are beating each other up throughout the Power 4 conferences and watching him consistently week in and week out put up the numbers, I feel like he is the favorite for the Heisman. And with the injury to Travis Hunter, we don't know how long he's going to be out for Colorado. I really feel like Ashton Jeanty over the next couple of weeks can kind of distance himself in that Heisman Trophy talk as these other teams continue to beat each other up in the Power 4 conferences.
Yeah, I believe he still is the favorite in Vegas right now to win that Heisman Trophy. And his numbers are unbelievable. He's on pace to break Barry Sanders' single season rushing record, potentially by the conference championship game. If he plays in the playoff, it could be even more. He's averaging 9.9 yards per carry halfway through the season. He's up to 1,248 yards through 6 games. But that's not actually 6 games. He has sat out the second half of 2 games. So he's really rushed for more than 1,200 yards in 5 games. It's unbelievable the big runs he's making, the tackles he's breaking. You have a lot of teams that are loading the box because they know he's the guy you got to stop. And when he breaks the tackle of that safety, there's nobody back there. He's got 70 yards to go. This has been an unbelievable season. He's going to get 2,000 yards pretty quickly here soon. Something that I think he had made a bet where he'd cut off his hair if he didn't get to 2,000 yards or something like that. That I don't think, unless he gets hurt, I don't think that's going to be an issue. And if he continues at this pace, and the fact that nobody else from the top teams has really stood out, he's in a good position to get to that Heisman Trophy ceremony.
Oh, I love it. I love it. That's the storyline I'm going to keep watching as college football continues to get to November, where the separation really starts to begin. Chris, man, always appreciate the time, man. Love following you on Twitter, formerly X, whatever, or X, formerly Twitter, whatever it may be. But I follow you every single week, man. Appreciate everything that you do, and we'll catch up with you soon, okay?
Thanks for having me.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku Channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.